to hearing both of you.
Yep. He's not ubiquitous, but he is omniscient. Okay, so, you know, so that we know. So now we'll go back to the non-expert part of the hearing, and Senator Sessions and I will continue. And I recognize Senator Ricketts for another round of questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Chairman Markey. Actually, one of the things I'd like to do is, for the record, submit this letter from the Deemster diesel folks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'd actually like to talk a little bit more about my colleague from California was talking about with regard to the renewable fuels, and just hit upon again how I think this is an area of common agreement that using more renewables is something that will help us reduce emissions, whether we're talking about biodiesel or renewable diesel. And the failure of the EPA to actually establish those renewable volume obligations at a level that we actually are already producing in the industry today. And what that does is it discourages more investment. In Nebraska, we have a soybean crush plant that is being invested in Norfolk, another one in David City. So the industry was making those investments. And now I'm told with these renewable volume obligations that the EPA is failing to show that it even actually lives up to what we're doing already. We're going to see a curtailment of the types of investments like we see in Norfolk and David City. And so if we want to see more renewable diesel and more biodiesel, we're going to have the EPA collaborate on renewable volume obligations so the industry will continue to invest and be able to make sure that we have more available to be able to use, because I think that is one of the things, as the Senator was talking about, we do find agreement. We may not agree exactly on how to implement it, but we certainly agree that encouraging more renewable fuels is something that's going to be important. One of the things I'd like to hit upon, and Ms. Torres, I didn't get a chance to ask you, but if you knew, on that whole electrification, the catenary system, are you aware of anybody who has done some work on, some pencil to paper work on what it would take to be able to power that if we were going to go down that path?
For the United States, not the exact numbers, but we do have numbers that are showing that it would be transitional, very feasible. And that's in my written testimony.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to hit upon is when you're talking about your members considering the purchase of a new locomotive, Mr. Jeffries, can you give us some insights on some of the specifications that they're considering when they think about, okay, it's time to buy a new locomotive? What's the process? What do they consider? How do they do that investment?
Well, first and foremost, demand. You got to have something to move with that locomotive. So the market's got to drive those investment decisions, and I'm certainly not going to represent myself as having any sort of authority or expertise on the individual investment decisions that each of the railroads makes. Obviously, that's their prerogative. But you need to look at one capability. Does the locomotive have the ability to haul heavy freight long distances? So what's the role of the locomotive? Is it to be used in yard? Is it to be used locally? Is it to be used out on the national network for long freight? Do you have the ability to charge it, to power it appropriately? And really, we're looking at 40-year assets. And so it's just like when we engage in infrastructure investment on the network. If you're taking a single track and you're double tracking that's an investment that has to be the return on that occurs over decades and decades and decades. And so these are very significant investments for very long periods of time. And as we sit here today, railroads are investing upwards of over $1 billion. I know of one railroad by retrofitting, modernizing 600 locomotives, many of which I believe are being done by the company that Mr. Rosen's union works at, and that's an over $1 billion endeavor. And that's going to result in lower emissions of all kinds.
So you mentioned, though, that somebody had ordered the battery electric locomotives and only was able to get half as many as they ordered. Can you talk more about what is the cause of why they could want to order battery electrics and not being able to get them delivered?
I think it was due to battery availability that one of the OEMs was running into challenges with. But again, that's kind of how the process works at the outset. But the encouraging thing is, I think we do see a future there. One of my railroads had a long-term project that had a battery electric working with diesel out in revenue service, a proof of concept. The results were favorable. And so the progress continues and the work continues. And so I think it's important that we keep an all of the above strategy, whether it's renewable fuels, whether it's battery electric, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's alternate means, that allows us to continue to do R&D, to identify what the best long-term prospects are. And again, keeping in mind that it is an interconnected national network where everyone's system needs to be able to function with the others in a seamless manner.
Great. All right. Thank you, Mr. Jeffries.
you.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Senator. You know, when I was a boy, I mean, I still